This is Platemark. My name is Anne Shafer, and I am your host. I'm an independent curator specializing in prints and printmaking. You have found us at Series 2 of Platemark, in which True Ludwig and I are offering up a history of prints in the Western world. This conversation is the second half of a conversation True and I had about Jacques Callot, which we started in the last episode, and I cut it off abruptly in the middle because we were transitioning from one set to another set. So this is the second half. You will, I think, enjoy it. This one is where we go into the miseries of war, which is, I think, his most powerful work. So I hope you'll stick with it. Any images that True and I talk about, as usual, are over on the show notes at platemarkpodcast.com. Over there, you'll also find a support and donate button. Click that and help me keep the lights on here at Platemark. I'd really appreciate it. And also, why don't you leave us a 60-second voicemail? There's a little icon of a microphone. Click it, and you can leave us a message, ask us a question, or ask us to talk about something. We'll happily tackle something. I'm going to skip the positionality this time, but if you've been following along, you know exactly who we are now. Okay, buckle up and let's get rolling.
So the Gobi is one series that he does, and it's just way too much fun. Another series he does in that moment, shortly thereafter, is the Balli di Sfessania, which is a gorgeous series. I'm showing Anne the frontispiece for this right now. These are 3 by 3.5 inches each. And the Balli di Sfessania is, these are all images of the Commedia dell'arte, which was obviously phenomenally popular in Florence at the time. These various characters come to be very well known in Commedia dell'arte all the way through Watteau and into the time of Picasso. The height of their growth as a performance team was in this time that Callot was working, a very big form of street performers.
I feel like the Tiepolo's always had them in their drawings.
And if you start thinking about the kinds of wonderful masks that they have, and there's going to be the lovely ingenue, and there's going to be the nasty, gnarly guy, and each of them, some of them playing instruments, but they're very elegant, and they were professional performers who also had to do improv on the spot. And they are said to do the Moorish dance, which goes back to the battle between the Moors and the Christians. That's what a Moorish dance is, believe it or not, and that's all part of their repertoire as well. So it's just got this really interesting, deep history to it. And here's Callot going, hey, these are some cool street performers. I'm going to do images of them. And so he does this gorgeous set of them. And so I just wanted to show Anne, in this case, as opposed to the Gobi, the dwarves, each of the dwarves had their own little space. They were unto themselves. They're an independent little thing. What do you notice about these different characters?
Yeah, in this one, each of the little prints has 2 figures in them, and sometimes they're engaged in sword fighting together, and sometimes they're just next to each other. But usually they're engaged. And then there is a hint of a landscape in which they're set.
And each of them is labeled, so we get to know who each of those characters is. Each of them are characters that I think you would come to realize that you've probably seen in some place. Oh, look, here's Signorina Lucretia, here's Pulcinello, just like the opera, right? And so we have all of these different kinds of characters. Here you can see 2 of characters, Rasullo, and one is playing an instrument, the other one is dancing to it. Look at his very elaborately projecting. He looks like he's twerking. And there they are acting in front of a stage where the rest of the populace is all watching the activity on the stage, which almost looks like a Punch and Judy kind of a show. Mm-hmm. And in each of these, again, you can see that Callot has allowed us to have something in the far distance that's very thinly etched lines, and then moving forward and forward till we get these figures in the front. They're just really quite stunning and goofy and remarkable and quite enjoyable. And they were, oh my God, these were cash cow. People loved these. And why wouldn't they? Gosh whiz. And by the way, if anybody wants to get one and send it to me, it's fine. I'd certainly happily take it.
Which one do you want?
Oh, golly. Look, there's Scapin. That's just it. Look at how pretty a Signorina Lavinia is. And so some of the ladies are quite lovely. And you can see the other thing that he does here is show these performers and the costumes that they wear to perform. But there's always in his work a way of paralleling the costumes and the performances of the wealthy alongside the street performers and the people that live at the lowest level. That in one respect there could be those that say he's giving life to that all the world's a stage kind of a concept. They're great, and you see how they do have a sense of that mannerist long distortion to them, but that elongating of the figures also makes them more elegant. So these are delightful. There are many of them. How could you not be happy? So there's that series, very popular. And I wanted to share another one, an up-close one with Anne. Just being able to see these different kinds of figures. And the one I'm showing right now is an Rarsa de Boyo, but behind them is a whole group of people that are encircling somebody that's on high stilts, and they're doing like a maypole dance around him. So there's these various ways of understanding costume, time, performance, traditions, all kinds of different ways of, it's one of the best resources we have for understanding costuming and theater in that time.
Do those two gentlemen have erect phalluses?
Oh, of course. Or really well-made cod pieces. Those are pretty much boners. And Dallin looks like he has maybe a nice dingly bell on him, don't you think? It's like belling the cat. Yeah.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah, of course. And that's what brings me to my other next favorite one. I would probably take this one, which is Captain Cardoni and Maramao, who, Anne, what are they doing?
It looks like the character on the left seems to have maybe no pants on, and he's about to get an enema from the person behind him who's holding an instrument that is about to be shoved up his tuchus.
Oh, so nice, yes. It's called a cleister tube.
And who knew?
Yeah, and it's, that's the enema to get your spoon to clean that area out. But think about it, this is theater, and here it is on the street, and but wait, that's a thing that Callot has a legacy that bears out with many artists. For instance, Goya.
Straight into Goya.
Goya owned Callot prints, and you can see the reverence for that in the one that is Swallow It, You Dog. It's a clergyman with a cleister tube that he's going to inflict on somebody from Los Caprichos, which was done in 1799. There's 200 some years between these two, but to see the kinds of lessons that Callot is giving us from the jump, when have we seen anything like this? We've been talking about crucifixes, we've been talking about village festivals and people barfing, thank you, the BAMs, but...
we've seen Rembrandt giving us characters, but they're always in a play.
But it's also a little later, and this
is why I get confused with Callot.
Exactly, because Callot dies in 1635. Right. Rembrandt gets to Amsterdam in 1632. Yeah. So he's a whopping 26.
Gotcha.
But he knows of Callot, and he owns some Calots.
Yeah, these act like catalogs of characters.
Exactly. Almost like a Godey's design book or something like that. They're a remarkable resource, but they're also funny as hell, and they're naughty, and they're irreverent, and a little bawdy, a little sexy. Hey, fun. So we get theater, we get Gobi, but we also get...
And what does that say about the market it's changed?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. See, so we've always thought, this isn't a crucifixion and it's this and it's this. Yeah, we're out of all just the churchy stuff.
Yes, we are.
This is post-Bruegel.
Yeah.
Right? Bruegel in the Netherlands was giving us
7 virtues, 7
vices. You're getting all kinds of proverbs in prints up north, many secular kinds of images. These are purely secular with these big lessons. If you want to really take it a little bit more than surface value, it's there. It's pretty awesome to me that it's there. And so we have the Balli des Fasania, we have the Gobi, and again, I just compare the dwarves, the hunchbacks from Velázquez Las Meninas. This was painted in 1656, and it just shows you how integral people with dwarfisms, people with different kinds of body types, jesters, what have you, were so important to the court. You can see them in the Callot, and you can see them right here as well-appointed members of royal family, if you will.
Las Meninas.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, there's another series that Callot undertakes in 1622, and it's sometimes called Les Gueux. It's a cycle on the Beggars. And these are interesting because they're actually a little bigger than what we've seen. This is the frontispiece, the captain of the barons of the Beggars, is the title page. Now, here's a fellow, Callot, who's courtly, and he's given us images of highfalutin people, and he's the poorest of the poor. And would you just explain what you're seeing in the image on your right, please?
It's an elderly gentleman with a beard and some crazy hair with torn clothes and a tattered cloak over his shoulders and 2 crutches that are helping him walk because one of his legs, or both of them, seem to be, I don't know, deformed. I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but he clearly has trouble walking.
Indeed. And one of them might be a club foot, but they're completely, it's a birth defect.
Yeah.
And in this case, you'll notice that these beggars are all isolated. They're completely unto themselves. They're not integrated into an environment. A guy who's lost a leg and has a peg leg and he's walking with crutches. But Callot is looking at these faces and he's looking at what their apparel is just as much and just as interesting to him as anything as the costumed performers were wearing or any of the wealthy elite were wearing. The woman with the cats, all by her little self there with her little friends. I think about the street people we say as we move through the city who... they're human beings. They're there. And Callot is observing those people.
But it's interesting that he's giving us their infirmities and their status in life based on costume and posture, but you don't get too much of their faces.
I don't know. I'm thinking the guy on the left has got a grizzled countenance. The old woman looks pretty terrifying. But again, the scale of it, that's a good point, Ann. But they're like a recipe card, like, right? Yeah. So 6.5 by 5.5 by 3.5. That's a pretty good size print, but the fact is that there's 25 in this series, which is a lot. And you start thinking like the mother with her children, and she's nursing, and she's having to do that in public, or the guy with his little pet dog. And you're right about body language, postures, the kind of clothing that they have to pull together to be who they are.
It's almost like their feet tell the tale in a lot of these.
If you need to know how the class of a person, you look at their footwear. That's the case even now. And here we have, but look how isolated they are.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's no world around them. And I think the solitary quality of these, there's a pathos there that I think, now Linda Holtz says it's just very cool and analytical. I don't know about that. Even looking at how much, like this gentleman that's sitting, I call him a gentleman. He's sitting in the middle. Look how small he's made them to the totality of the plate. Brilliant composition, but that alone, the solitary quality of these individuals.
But I'm still seeing them as figures in a design book.
Okay, I can see that. Okay, I can see your point. And that's a good point when you start thinking about, this one's really difficult. The sickly beggar who's got wildly deformed legs from a terrible birth defect, folded he's seated on the ground and his face shows a great deal of pain.
Yeah.
There's a beggar here with his hat out, his hat in hand.
His giant rosary around his neck.
Absolutely. Now, the thing I wanted to point out to you about this series of beggars, though, 1622 to 1623, is it's interesting. Princeton, the scholarship there, these etchings belong to the artist's most popular series, The Beggars. Wide range of...
the most popular series?
That's according to Princeton's literature. The etchings belong to the artist's most popular series, The Beggars, and sympathetically depict two impoverished figures with their canine and feline companions. It depends on who it's reading it.
Yeah.
And I really think that there's something very endearing about a little old cat lady. There's something really sad about this dejected figure with his hat out in front of him. This is the most why is it the most popular series?
Yeah, good question.
So here's my next point, because even if you don't agree with they look like they're stock types that go in a costume book, this is the thing that you should take away. This is your lesson for the day, my friends, is that the difference, one would say that in Rembrandt, who has obviously looked at the Beggars of Callot, Rembrandt's beggars tend to be integrated into society. And the one that I'm showing Anne right now is beggars receiving alms at the door of a house, and the owner of the house is leaning out over his Dutch door, handing the beggar family some money. But they're there, and there's more of an equality there. They're integrated. There's a pathos to that.
There's narrative.
Right. And this is the one that I think started to make me choke up when I was in class one day. And but I wanted to point out to you that this guy here that Callot has done, what's the word I put under there?
Handicapped.
That's a dirty word in contemporary society. Did you know that?
Yes, there's a reason.
Because handicapped are people who beg. They have their cap in their hand. They are less than. And this is the thing that I think these kinds of prints can teach us. When you say it's handicapped accessible, just say it's accessible. This kind of leveling that Rembrandt was giving us starts with Callot saying, hey, I'm going to show every stripe of humanity. So That's my little pulpit for the day, because I did a lot of work for making the arts accessible to people with disabilities. And I looked at this one with the guy with his cap in his hand, and it's boom. It's right there. Now you pull up to the stoplight here in Baltimore, and they say, I'll take Venmo. It's like, I don't even know how to fucking use Venmo. And I don't carry change anymore because everybody's... So do you have a bunch of singles in your car to help somebody out?
I try to.
Yeah. And this
My
is...
kids always take the dollars.
They don't buggers. I'm gonna nag your boys next time I see shit balls. But it's interesting. The other thing that makes, I think, comparing these two images useful is that with the Rembrandt Beggars, you can totally see that feathery, lovely, scribbly, loose line of etching. And Callot was using the same technique of scribing a line into a plate, but biting it in acid. And look how much more, can we say a beggar is, air quotes, elegant? But look at it. The line is more elegant.
Yeah.
So that's our buddy Callot. Now,
Oh boy.
we have to get to this point because I know that you probably have the rest of your lives to lead. But the reason that Callot, it was always a big hit when I showed it to the students, when they take this class, I tell them I want them to figure out what their manifesto is. You got to find out what rocks your world. What would you say if you had to say something many times over? If you're going to make a print and you have something to say, you better believe what you have to say or know what you're talking about. And in this case, I'm going to get to this series that Callot made in 1633, The Miseries and the Misfortunes of War. And I'm showing Anne the frontispiece for this.
2 years before he died.
Exactly. Yes. And the biography would say that what this phase did in his hometown of Nancy did nothing but aggravate the ulcer that he had going. He needed rest and all of this, but it was as though he knew that he had to make a set. And I can't help but think that's the case because here is this independent duchy, and Callot's family has been allied with the dukes of this area. They've been a part of the history of this place. But Louis XIII has decided, no, I would think that should be a part of France. And it shouldn't go to the Holy Roman Empire. It's sitting right there in the middle between those two. It can't go to the Spanish. It can't go, it should be ours. And so he gets his mercenary soldiers to go in and completely take over the town. How can that be any different than Putin sending his Russian soldiers in to take over Ukraine and saying that should be a part of Russia and that they can't be themselves? Because, of course, they ultimately would fall to France and become a part of it. What I am showing is the first of 18 prints that Callot made on this subject, unbidden. Here's the part that blows my mind. Callot had received commissions from Louis XIII in earlier times. He had received commissions from other people that would be a part of the offense to his hometown. And here is this time when these soldiers come in and they commit these brutalities in his hometown, and he documents it. And this is, I think, the first time I can ever think in the history of printmaking, of art, where somebody has taken the time to show us blow by blow what went on at Abu Ghraib or in Vietnam, in Cali.
But it's got privilege of the king.
And that's why, did you see how, here we said, second print, okay, it's with...
Oh, boy.
And that blows my mind too.
Absolutely. Because
Louis had said, I want you to do this for me. And Callot was like, no, I'm doing this. And yet he still puts with the privilege of the king. Isn't that wild? The frontispiece is showing, here are our lovely costumes. And here are all these lovely instruments of war. And the shields and the drums and the cannons and this lovely handwriting. And all of this looks perfectly engraved, very elegant. And again, I want to remind everybody that these are a whopping 3.5 inches by 7 inches wide. There was a first printing that he put out in 1633, and there's a second printing that went out in 1635. I believe that was posthumous, and they added a poetry at the bottoms of them that explained what was going on in the scenes. I don't know what Callot would have thought of that, but I wanted for you to enjoy, if that can be said, each of these scenes, because the other thing I wanted to bring to your attention was essentially the titles. Things suffer in translation sometimes. So, of these 8 plates, right, you get your frontispiece.
I think there's 18? 18.
Yes.
Okay.
So, I'm going to go here and I'll give you the titles. So, the frontispiece shows us about the miseries and the misfortunes of war. The second plate will show us enrolling the troops, where the French are gathering the troops together. And look at how regimented they are. They have all of their staves up. And he's using that telescopic vision of his to give us the foreground of figures at the front that are literally signing them up. Hey, yeah, you can be a part of this group. We're going to go fuck up this village. And look at how orderly they've become. Enrolling the troops. The next one is the battle. It's a war scene. What do you see, Anne, here? What do you see?
There's roiling sky / smoke, I assume, from cannons. And there's lots of horses and bodies in the foreground displayed. It's just chaos, really.
Which is interesting because the image right before it was order and all the spears
Things
upright.
Things go to hell really quickly.
Right. And so it goes, straight down the toilet. And you see the just slain horses. And then you go further back and you see behind there's this next wave coming in with their spears erect. And how can someone make a sky that's, air quotes, looks engraved, but it's smoky? And how is that happening? And every semester when you would pull this out, I don't know how much time you got to spend looking at it, but that everybody that actually is going to take the time to look at these images, you're so lucky you live in the time and the place that you do, because you can go clickety-click through Google and get these images to fill your screen. But imagine an artist creating 18 images that flaunt in the face of the King of France. This is what you did to my town. It blows my doors off that he does this. The next one is called The Marauders, although in another source, if we we're going to put it in 20th century terms, we'd say a raid. All right, so Marauders sounds romantic in the past, but this is people coming in and starting to just beat up society. And
is that a tavern or something?
Yeah. But it's also interesting. Look at this figure that's run off. He's already looted something and he's scampering off with it. But it still has that same kind of theatrical foreground, middle ground, background.
Right. The guy who's running off is in shadow, and it's part of this framing tree on the left.
Absolutely. And then these guys come in with their spirits. Look at the composition. Look how smart that is. See how the spears are pointing towards the left, which, to my way of thinking, since we all write left to right, that adds more tension. And those diagonals is something that the Venetian artist Tiepolo and them would start using, those kinds of diagonals. That becomes something very useful to the...
And they line up with the roof line.
Exactly. Extreme close-ups are possible for you to see these insane, delicate little tiny lines.
These are in Wikimedia Commons, so
you're going to have a link and you're going to be so happy.
I'll give you the link, but you should do it. You should go look yourself.
You really need to. But here, you can also, because this is such an extreme close-up, can you see how the ink has piled up here in the darks? And it's not engraved, right? You can see the fuzziness of it. This
is still the Marauders one?
Yeah, but we're like so up close on it, but it gives you a chance to see the difference. But at first blush, when you look at these images, you go, oh, it looks like an engraving. Very smart. Think about this, though. This is a big, hard, nasty topic, and he's able to make these 18 images and get them out there. And you can't put that genie back in the bottle. Here we have, this is a looting of a farm. We're in an interior shot. What's going on, Anne?
Let's see. There's somebody hanging from his feet above the fire in the hearth. In the right hand.
Literally getting burned alive.
Center right. And then it looks like they're about to rape a woman in the bed in the center back.
And it's not a pretty Rubens, The Rape of the Daughters of Lysippus. This is a rape. Right?
Yeah, like all sorts of things are going on. There's some guy has got a woman by her hair on the left corner, and she's trying to get her kid in front of her away.
And you see how domestic the space is?
Yeah.
And all this evil is being perpetrated in this. There's still pots and pans and hams hanging from the ceiling. Oh, and it is the pillage of a farm or a village. Yeah. And next we will have devastation of a monastery.
Oy.
And the windows are being broken out of the church. The church is on fire. They're doing evil things to men of God. Look at it's amazing. And yet it's all there.
It's like the sack of Rome.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's made visible, and this is happening. And it's this, I don't want to say that it's not dramatic. It's saying this is going on. To make a long story short, when I give a quiz, sometimes I'll ask the students, give this an ism. Is this romanticism? Is it neoclassicism? Is it mannerism?
Which ism is it?
And I had a student put journalism, and I gave him full points because that's brilliant. You know, when the golden age of illustrators went out during the Spanish-American War, they called it reportage. But that's journalism. They're telling that story. So we have that, and then the next we would have the looting and burning of a village more. And it's an incredible movie, don't you think it's movie-esque?
Yeah.
Here's one that one would say holding up a coach, but Wikimedia is going to say it's highway robbery. I think that actually helps us understand that this is not the distant past. Arrest of the offenders or apprehension of the marauders. I don't care. It just shows that people are assholes to each other. And now here's the strappado. And this is, I know you don't like this one, and you shouldn't, because it's torture, and all of the French are watching this, aren't they? Look at how well organized they are. Their guns are all perfectly put on their shoulders, and they're watching this person be rung up on the strappado, and here comes the next victim. All of it is being perpetrated in front of you, and here's the one that everyone should know. And thank God this is one that does make it into the art history books. See, printmaking can be the ugly stepchild of art, architecture, painting, sculpture. Printmaking and, air quotes, minor art forms that make major impact. This is the one that I think virtually none of my students will forget this image. What are we seeing here, Anne?
This is called the hanging tree, or the hanging, and there's a large tree, it looks like in the center of town, and there are probably 30 people hanging from it by their necks, and looks like a priest is following the next victim up.
And giving him the last rites on that ladder.
And there, as usual, the French soldiers are all very orderly and watching.
With their spears erect, perfectly lined up. Over here, there's another priest talking to the next guy that's about to get wandered up there. And then if you look down at the base of the tree, you'll also see that the soldiers are gambling over the clothing, which is like a biblical scripture. Hey, you're not going to need those anymore. Let's get who gets to win his clothes.
Right.
Hey, it's so real. It's so much like strange fruit. If you covered up, you took your hands, you covered up the images on either side, and you just looked at the tree, it would look like all of those different kinds of pictures we saw when we did our trip to the lynching museum and all of that whole triangle, the civil rights triangle in Alabama. It is alarming to think that this was made in 1633. We get to see this. This happened, and this is going to have a big impact on Goya. It's like you need to speak the truth, even if your voice shakes. So we have the firing squad. So they're...
Hello, Manet.
Absolutely. And Manet was looking at Goya, and Goya was looking at Callot. And it's amazing. This is a little primitive, but, burning at the stake. I'm not going to say hopefully they don't do it anymore, because I've been listening to the news. Here's breaking on the wheel. They tie the person to the wheel, and they smack them, and they essentially dismember them in front of a group of people that are going, ha, ha, ha. I listen to NPR, man. That stuff is going on. All right, here's a hospital. These are people who've been injured that are trying to go to the hospital. And we can see that the village, the people of Nancy trying to get back. Here we have beggars and victims of war dying on the wayside. This actually reminds me a lot of going down the road in India, frankly. But it's no different than going down Charles Street. And it's not panhandlers. These are people that are suffering. And then we have the revenge of the peasants, because at one point the peasants fight back. They have an opportunity. It doesn't mean they'll win, but at least they try to stand. And then here's the absolute irony of ironies, is the very last frame of this series of 18 of the Miseries of War, which is
the distribution of rewards.
What's happening?
We're in the throne room of the Duke or the King, I don't know which.
Louis XIII.
Louis XIII, and he must be telling people
good job
what they're going to get for their success.
Look, you've done a fine job, and I'm so pleased that you managed to stand up for me and my...
Dukedom for you, and a dukedom for you.
Yeah, that's right. One for every... Yes, exactly right. And so the ironies that exist in this are painful and brilliant and awful, but it sets up a new piece of history that we haven't had. And what I try to show my students is to see this is all part of that 30 Years' War and the different kinds of, I want this, and you're Catholic, and we're Protestant, we're trying to take this over. All three of the images that I'm showing Anne right now were done about 1635. One of them is a Rubens, which is called The Consequences of War, and there's Venus trying to keep Mars from going off to war, and remembering that Rubens was a diplomat and tried to be an ambassador that would help put that away. Another painting done by Velázquez about 1635, which is called The Surrender at Breda. It's another huge history painting, and it shows the Spanish receiving the keys to the city from the Dutch. Here is the Spanish group with all proper, standing up straight with their staves erect, looking grand. And the poor little ragtag team of Dutch folk are handing over the keys to their city. And in one respect, the general's going, a fine job. That was a great battle. There's this whole gentility to war. And I'm showing Anne, at the same time I'm showing those, I'm showing the hanging tree, because all of these were done at the same time. One is mythological. One is, these are the facts. Oh, this is very staged and lovely and wasn't more interesting. Despite the fact that it was a surrender at Breda, and have you ever seen Breda look like that far distant? There's no uphill in Breda. It's all low country. But my point here is that it's the most destructive period that one can think of in history. And what I wanted to get across is these little bitty prints have such power. This is when I put up so my students understand that when you have an image, it has power and you can't take it back. That imagine printing hundreds of these sets of prints and people buy them and you're getting your story out there. A Rubens painting is gorgeous, but it's going to be in one location. And a Velázquez painting is going to be in one location. But Callot prints are going to get everywhere.
And very closely after the event. So it's early news.
It is news. It's of the day, if you think about it. And he got it out there quickly because he's etching it. He's not engraving them. 18 plates, boom, out there. So much so that there's a second printing 2 years later.
That's amazing.
And so the idea of what style is it? It's truth-telling, it's journalism, and it's good journalism. It's nothing but the fact. So we have that. And one of the other things that we would sometimes bring out was the small set of the Disasters of War, and it's really only 7 pieces. It's a much smaller, it's 6 plates and a frontispiece, and they're stunning. Now, the thought is that these were studies for the big set, but they weren't printed until after.
Okay.
But it's a way of seeing where his thought process is. It's really neat to as in looking at the prints of Picasso that he did prior to Guernica, where he was tuning up his ideas. Mm-hmm. This is that same kind of a concept.
Gotcha.
These are, I think, a little bit much more elegant than some of the difficult.
Not quite as gruesome.
No.
There's one hanging figure there on the right.
Yeah.
On the top.
But I think it's a bearable war as opposed to some of the other things we saw. So by the time we get to the end of this, we're very near the end now. You have to understand that now Callot, his stomach problems are getting worse and worse. It could be an ulcer, it could be cancer, we don't know. But essentially he dies of peritonitis and it bleeds out and it's internally and it's dreadful. But one of the very last images he creates is the Temptation of St. Anthony. It's done the year that he dies. And again, one large Callot print. It's amazing. Now, we would cheat and we wouldn't tell him that it was like a 19th century photographic production. It wasn't an honest to God. Yeah, we totally cheated.
I've forgotten that.
That's
okay.
Because I wanted, it's an anonymous reversed copy. That's what the BMA had.
Gotcha.
But that didn't stop it from being freaking riveting. Anne's getting to look at this thing. It's full screen. The sheet of paper is 14 and a half inches by 18 and a half inches. Again, huge. 2 plates together. What do you see? We remember old buddy Anthony.
Yeah, so we should all remember the Temptation of Anthony that is seared in everyone's memory by Schongauer, which is a single figure being pulled at and roughed up by all of these demons that are floating around him. But in the Callot, it's this whole hellscape with this giant dragon across the top of it. It's almost like the grotesque that framed
the fan.
Yeah.
But what is he? He's vomiting out all of these hideous little creatures as though he's barfing out this pestilence of evil, these nasty little creatures.
He's chained. Look, he's chained.
Yeah.
Oh, I never saw that.
And a magnificent address too. Let's pick that one apart.
And where's Anthony? This is the thing that
that's okay. So that's the part that's okay. It's a Where's Waldo.
Yeah.
All right. I make him look for him. Because with the Schongauer, Anthony is right dead center. He's in a wreath of hideous creatures. Bruegel does that same topic 100 years later, and I actually put that in a great chain of being thinking kind of thing for the class too, where they can really go looking for Anthony. And Callot knew of Bruegel, of course, and so he takes it to this even higher level. So we have the hideous dragon-esque creature vomiting out all these nasty little creatures, all these bats, hideous demony things flying around. Talk to me about this thing right here, Anne. What do you see here?
Let's see. There's a creature whose front legs are wheels and his...
The best stuff, man.
He's vomiting out spears
and swords
and staffs.
Yep. And somebody's poking his butt
And he's
make
got
it
like
fart.
armor on, and he's got flames coming out of his ass.
It sort of looks like Durer's rhinoceros went to hell and got wheels for front legs. And look, it's even trundling over a victim.
Oh, yeah.
And you can see the Boschian quality of here's like this lobster man with a beer stein and a sword.
Right down in the center at the bottom.
And then here we have this bird-headed squatting male figure poking this lamb in the ass. And we have other horrible, nasty creatures of myth and doom everywhere. It's riotous. It's loud. It's awesome.
These are all like Star Wars characters, aliens.
Yeah, they are. Why do you suppose they were looking for?
Yeah.
And look at all this pestilence and ships at sea and skeletons and it's still done, of course, within a shop, so it looks engraved.
Right.
Oh, and look at him belching fire and this
the dragon right by the cave there.
with a snake-headed monster riding it. But wait, what's handing under here under the stage? Oh, poor guy. And there they are, ripping and pitching at him. And there's St. Anthony with his little tiny halo, pleading, trying to do everything he can to not succumb to the warlike nature of humans of this very time. This, to me, is Callot just saying, look, this is his Guernica.
Yes.
It absolutely is his Guernica, and it's an astonishing. I would love to take the time to read the address on this because it's really quite ample.
Yeah.
It was an astonishing thing. By the time he died, Callot was wise enough to have had alliances and high-crowned heads wanting his work. He had a really important printer in Paris that was pulling his prints for him, but off he went, and he died at a mere age of 43. Durer wasn't much older than that, but to think about how he advanced printmaking, and it wasn't him going, I'll advance the history of prints. It was, how can I get this image, get it done, make it look elegant so that people are going to want it? What do people need and want to see? And then what should they see? And that's the part that gets me. I don't think that it was like he isn't like in a Vietnam protest thing. He was saying, these are the facts of the day. This happened in my hometown, and you need to see what happened.
So, 2 questions. One, before the Parisian printer was helping him out, he was printing himself?
I think for quite a little while towards the last half of this, he had Israel. It was, I think, was a person up in Paris that was printing for him. I knew you would ask me a hard question and I couldn't give you a definitive answer. But you'll see Israel show up in the address on some of these.
Right.
But to be able to see, it's also interesting how Callot actually did a first version of the Temptation of St. Anthony in about 1617.
Oh.
And it is a completely different thing. It just looks like, hey, here's this event. It's going to happen.
It's like one of those events his father organized.
Yeah. It's okay, here was a bad day, and it was like Anthony had it, and he was being tempted, but it's a rough day for old Tony. But look at it.
Wow.
Got the same kind of dragony guy at the top, but can you see how it's just a mannerist removed? It's a costumed, as you say, it's an event of, hey, look, here's a hellscape.
Yeah.
But look how orderly this hellscape is. And then we go to the one that he finishes with, and I have to say that's a hell of a... It's not to say that he didn't do a few other things. He did some sins, some more. He did other religious issues. He certainly did them because he was a Catholic, and those could sell too. But we're sharing these things that have the absolute meat and potatoes of, I think, what rocks the world of people knowing how important this artist is and how his line was so incisive and smart and looking at the times of his day. And then I always like to have my students think about what's that great chain of being? What delights and enthuses you? You know, we had one student who did that protest art, which was really good. And you actually kept a couple of them. And he was looking back to Goya. And then there are other students who would take the class that they weren't printmakers, but they could write a final paper, which would trace a history, a theme. Would it be light? Would it be trees? Would it be, in this case, let's say it's evil machines or warlike scenes. And here I have a Temptation of St. Anthony by Schongauer to Bruegel, up to Callot, up to what that kind of torment would be for Goya. And for me, I keep thinking about how that works. And there is an artist working today, Sandow Burke, who has been working in exactly the same kind of a thought process. He actually made those enormous relief prints after Callot, but dealing with these same kinds of difficult issues. So I always like to put a great chain of being in there. Anna knows all these people. She knows they're all the artists that rock my world. They're all difficult. None of them are pretty, but they're all amazing. And they all really spoke what they thought mattered deeply to them. The last image I'm showing you is a lovely epitaph and portrait of Jacques Callot. It was done by Abraham Bosse, who wrote the very first treatise on how to do etching. But I wanted to share that with you because I think it's really wonderful looking. It really eulogizes this artist. Here's an up close and look how pretty Callot is sitting with. He's in a bust now, and look, we have Noble. We have a weeping Puto holding a skull. We have another one like wearing with the escutcheon of his homeland, and then this whole marvelous Callot to posterité.
Yeah, the dedication.
Absolutely. In his time, the minute he died, he was already in Van Dyck's iconography. He was a great artist and celebrated, and he was just a printmaker.
That's astonishing, because we haven't seen anyone who only made prints, and I'm also struck by the fact that he never reproduced somebody else's design.
Not that I know of.
Not that we've seen.
No, he would reproduce his own, though. That was another thing. He would take these incredible studies. He'd do such careful studies that he'd do the first set, and then if he needed to make another set of plates that matched the first ones, he could do it, and they would match. It's like his second edition could be just as precise as the others. To have that kind of precision, but have that kind of vision, that telescopic view of the world, I think that's amazing. And I think he tells us as much or more of the story than Velázquez or Rubens or Poussin. I'm getting as much of the truth as I needed from what he was making sure that I saw. And that's why he rocks my world, and I hope he rocks yours. Anne's going to give you all kinds. Look at this nonsense. Look how beautiful it is. It tells us all about how he was and when he died in March of 1635 and how much he did. Pray to God for that you will remember him and what he contributed. I pray to God you all do too. He's one of my heroes. That's all.
Yeah, so can you go to the slide that has your chain of...
Great chain of being?
Your great chain of being.
Okay.
I think that's probably worth saying out loud.
You have to say it because I wouldn't do it.
Okay, so if you ever wanted to do a show that traced the history of artists who packed a punch and told it like it was, you would start with Callot, always, and you would slide directly into Goya, and then you skip over... Manet could go in there, too.
He could. He did those 2 lithographs that are killer.
Sorry, Daumier. And then we have the only woman in this one, Kollwitz, who we'll get to. George Bellows.
Which I think we may need to talk about, because his whole series of lithographs on the First World War and the Bryce Report and the atrocities that were committed in Belgium, they're just riveting.
Yeah.
You think of him as, hey, swimmers, boxers, but he's also, he took it on.
Otto Dix.
50 prints of the war, Der Krieg, and he fought in that First World War, so he knows.
Those were nuts. Picasso, obviously.
Guernica.
Yeah, Guernica. Leonard Baskin.
His Hydrogen Man and those other things that dealt with the aftermath of the Second World War.
And then there's this artist that you all need to know named Ludwig.
Some crackpot.
True, has himself in there because he indeed is following in this grand line of succession, and then Sandelberg.
Because when I made the tapestry repeated.
Well, and you could add, sorry, I interrupted you. You could add Zarwar, Sidhu, and Ralph
sure,
to your list.
Well, I'll let you type that in.
Okay, so sorry, tell us about your tapestry.
No, you can tell. You've told them about it. You did a thing on it.
I did, right, yes.
But it was a take on, it was my take putting together those same kinds of images across history about, it was my reaction to September 11th. And again, it's when I was putting a truth out there, and the truth can be ugly, but it can also be attractively presented so that it's not so hideous that people won't look and won't think. So I make it a denkmal, a thing on which you will ponder, as opposed to just say, hey, there's blood and it's bad. And that's what Callot does as well, is look at what is happening. There's still a bizarre kind of an elegance to it, but it's remarkably honest. I don't think there's any unauthentic kind of mark that's made in that. Can you imagine making those prints against the French king? Can you imagine being Goya making those prints against the Spanish king? I wonder where he got his testicular fortitude. That's why this kind of stuff just blows. That's why I live for this.
Yeah.
That's my thought.
Okay.
So thanks, Anne, for sticking with me on this little voyage with these little teeny weeny prints.
Well, thanks for bringing Callot to life for us all. That's great.
Thanks for listening, and enjoy the close-ups.
All of those things will be in the show notes, I promise.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Platemark with me, Anne Shafer, and True Ludwig, who is a remarkable human being and
I know no one more qualified to talk to you about the history of prints than True. As always, a reminder that any images we talk about are over on the website at platemarkpodcast.com. Over there you'll also find an opportunity to support Platemark, help me keep the lights on here at the old office, just me sitting behind a desk. I always need to thank Michael Diamond for the use of his original music. A little side note, he's my husband's uncle. And he's also a friend and a very talented musician. So we're thrilled to be able to use his music, and we thank him for letting us do so. Okay, I think that's it. We will see you next time.